Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Shabbos Daf Kuf Chav Ches. Right on the top of the Omer at the first line. Begins the Gemara, Avaloi es ha-tevel. The Mishnah told us one may not move tevel on Shabbos. Tevel is something which the Truma and Maisa was not yet separated from. And it's inedible, it's asa to be eaten. It's muktzah. Pshita, says the Gemara, isn't that obvious? Of course it's muktzah, why would I think otherwise? Lo tzricha. Apparently we're speaking about betevel, which is only tevel midrabanan. It only has a status of tevel midrabanan. Kigoin shezorei ba'atzitz she'eni nakeh. For instance, when it was planted in a flower pot which didn't have a hole, was eini nakeh, was unperforated. So, in which case it wasn't connected to the ground, it wasn't nurturing from the ground. And min ha-Torah, any produce that grows in this type of a flower pot is not obligated in Trumas and Meiser. It's only a chiv d'Rabbanan. So it's a tevel midrabanan. The Mishnah is here informing us that although it's only ism d'Rabbanan, it's considered to be muktzah. Perhaps I would think, some Mefarshim say that Issa d'Rabbanan is only an obligation on the person. It's only a prohibition which is chal, which is sitting on the person. It's not, it doesn't affect the actual object itself. So this tevel, which is only asam d'Rabbanan, the person can't eat it, but the object itself is inherently fine and edible min ha-Torah. So there's nothing wrong with the actual object itself. Perhaps it would not be considered muktzah. Mishnah tells us, yes, even this type of tevel is regarded as muktzah. It cannot be moved on Shabbos. Continues the Gemara, V'loi Maserishain. The Mishnah said, nor can we move Maserishain sheloi nitla trumasai, whose truma was not separated from it. So it's inedible. Pshita, of course. Why would I think otherwise? Let's take a look at Rashi here. The top line on Rashi, sheloi nitla trumasai kasal kadaitach. The Gemara at this point figures we're speaking about the Maserishain sheloi nitla trumas masa sheloi, that the trumas masa was not separated from the maserishan. Now, once again, we know that when we have a kri, which is a pile of grain, it is chayiv and all the trumas and meisters, and the way to do it is you take off the truma gedola, you give it to the kohen, then you take off the maserishan, which is a tenth of what's remaining, give it to the Levi. The Levi takes that portion, and from it he removes a tenth and gives it to the kohen. That's trumas maser. So more at this point figures that the Mishnah, which says you can't move Maserishan Shaleinit Trumasa, speaking about the portion given to the Levi, the Maserishan, whose Truma was not separated. The Levi had not separated the Truma of that Mas and given to the Kohen. Then of course, it's prohibited. Pshita, then obviously, it's Muktzak, it's inedible. Says Umalay Tzricha, apparently we're speaking about a unique case. Shegdimoi Bikri. What happened was that the Yisrael, instead of beginning the system of Trumas and Maishos by giving the Truma Gedola to the Kohen first, he bypassed the Kohen and he took a portion and gave it first to the Levi. So he gave the Maserishan to the Levi, and the Levi did his job. He took his Maserishan and separated a tenth for the Kohen. So we have the Yisrael who is Igdimoy Bekri, so he advanced, and he first took off the Maserishan from the Kri prior to separating the Truma Gedola to the Kohen. Shenitu memeno maser. So this Maserishan was had the Trumas Meiser was nital memeno, was separated from that Maserishan. So Maser here means a tenth of that Maserishan. The Levi separated and gave it to the Kohen. V'lo nitlu memeno Truma Gedola. However, Truma Gedola was never separated from it because the Levi got his portion prior to the Truma Gedola having been separated from the Kri. So this Maserishan was addressed as far as the Trumas Maser. The Levi fulfilled his obligation, he took a tenth and gave it to the Kohen. But there was never Truma Gedola, which was removed from this produce. Perhaps I would think it's mutter. Perhaps I would think, as we learned yesterday, Papa challenged the Abai. He said, well, when the pasuk exempts the portion of the Levi from the obligation of Truma Gedola, perhaps we're speaking about even this case, where the owner separated the Maserishan after the grain has already attained its dogon status, its grain status, and had a chiyuv of Truma Gedola. Perhaps even then, if the Levi took his portion, perhaps it's exempt from Truma Gedola. Kamash Malon, the Mishnah teaches us no. Kadeshani le'abaye. Just as Abai responded to Rav Papa and he told him no, we have that pasuk which tells us that even the portion of the Levi is chayiv in Truma Gedolah. And apparently he's speaking about this type of case where the Levi accepted his portion of Maser Rishon after the grain has already attained its grain status and was already obligated, was already mechuyev in the obligation of Truma Gedolah. In this case, the Maser Rishon is chayiv, is obligated in Truma Gedolah as well. The Levi must separate two things: the standard Trumas Maser, in addition to the Truma Gedolah, which was never separated from this grain. So the Mishnah here is telling us that the Maser Rishon Shalin Lita Trumasai, which means the portion of the Levi whose Truma Gedolah was not separated from, that is considered to be muktzah, it's useless, it's inedible, it's asur, and therefore you can't move it. Continues the Gemara of Velois Maser Sheni. Mishnah said, nor can he move Maser Sheni or Hegdish Shaloi Niftu, which were not yet redeemed. Pshita, isn't that obvious? It's inedible, it's asur to be eaten. Lo Tzricha, we must be speaking about the Niftu, they were redeemed. V'lo Niftu Kil Chasa, but not properly. For instance, Maser, this is the Maser Sheni, which he attempted to redeem, but he did it incorrectly. Shepedoy al gabe simoin. He redeemed it. He transferred the kedusha onto a simoin, onto an unminted slug. The Rachmana Amar, the pasuk says, "V'tzarta kesev yodecha." He meant to use money. V'tzarta, we learn from here, davar sheish bo tzura, money which has a form, which has something engraved into it. It's minted, has its surah. So something which has no tzura is unfit. So you use that type of coin, an unminted slug, it's not suitable and it doesn't work. Hegdish, when the Mishnah speaks about Hegdish Shalei Nifta, it doesn't mean he didn't attempt to transfer the Kedusha, but he did it incorrectly. Shechila Gabe Karka, he transferred the Kedusha on top of Karka, on top of land, Rachmana Omar, V'nosan HaKesef V'kamlei. He must provide the money for the Chilul to work. He can't do it on Karkas. And Mishnah is speaking about such cases that the Maser and the Hegdish were redeemed incorrectly, improperly, and therefore it doesn't work, and it's asur ba'achil. Continues the Gemara of Leis HaLuf. The Mishnah told us, nor can he transfer the luf, these beans. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Bryce. Now the concept in the Bryce is going to be that any type of material which is suitable for animal feed, animals which are generally raised by people, so any type of feed which is suitable for those animals is not considered to be muktzah on Shabbos. And if it's something which is a unique animal, but he personally happens to be raising that animal, that's also okay. The food which stands to be fed to that animal is not muktzah. Continues the Gemara. Tanar Rabbanan, we learned in the Brayso, metaltlin es hachatzav v'pnei shumachal letzvayim. One can be metaltal the chatzav, which is a certain type of grass. Rashi says it grows straight down, the roots go straight down. Actually, Yeshua used that to set the borders of Eretz Yisrael. It's a very suitable type of thing to use because it goes straight down. It doesn't take the nutrients from either side. So it's a perfect boundary. So this type of grass can be moved on Shabbos. It's not muktzah because it is fed to animals. Meshu machal etzvayim. It's fed to deer. Vesachardol, one can move mustard, meshum machal yoinim, because it's fed to pigeons. Now, if you recall now Mishnah, we had chardo, which was actually muktzah. So the Farshim explain that it seems to be dependent on the locale. The Tan of the Mishnah was discussing an area where they didn't generally raise pigeons, whereas the Bryce is discussing a place where raising pigeons was something acceptable and common. Therefore, the chardal, which is used to feed the pigeons, is not muktzah. Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, a chiddush, af metaltlin shivei schuchis. One can even move broken pieces of glass. Why? Because it is feed for ostriches, which is something which the typical person doesn't raise. It's something which is raised by princes, wealthy people. Nevertheless, Rav Shimon Gamliel holds, Kol Yisrael b'nei malachim. All of Yisrael are regarded as classified as princes, and something which is suitable for a prince to raise, we consider every yid. We consider it to be appropriate for every yid. Kol Yisrael, all Yisrael have that same class, the same status. We don't differentiate between groups of people. Just as, if you remember, he said in the Mishnah that one can be metaltal this luf because it's machal oirvin, it's food for ravens. And that's also something which only unique exotic people do, raise. So apparently he holds that Kol Yisrael B'nei Malachim, we lump together, we classify all Yisrael as one, something which is considered to be appropriate conduct for princes and wealthy people, will apply to all of Yisrael as well. So again, these broken glass pieces are not muktzah because it is fed to the ostriches. If so, what about bundles of vine branches? That as well can be moved because it's feed for elephants, which is also something generally raised only by princes and wealthy people. So why do you specify only broken glass? What about zmoiros? Says the Gemara, Reb Shimon Gamliel, he holds ne'ami yeshchichi. Ostriches are commonly raised, at least by wealthy people, by princes, royal families. However, pilin, elephants, that's not something which even they would raise. Lo shchichi, that's not common. So there's a very small machlekes here. In principle, they both agree that something which is raised even by princes is considered to be appropriate for the ordinary yid. The question is, practical question, whether elephants fall into that category. Omer Ameimer, v'hu islay namiyos. This allowance to move around the broken glass on account of the ostriches, that's only if he personally happens to be raising ostriches. Omer Avashilam Eimer. Now, if you say that this is a requirement, he personally has to have this animal in his possession. If so, how are you going to explain what Rav Nosson challenged? Right? He challenged Shimon Gamliel and he said, "Chavilas moiros, bundles of vines. He will be able to move because it is a feed for elephants." Right? That was his question. Why do you limit it to glass? Why not vines? Now, according to Ameimer, that you require that he actually have the animal in his possession to allow the moving of this animal feed. If that's the case, so the discussion here is when the animal is in his possession. So what's the question regarding elephants? If he has pilin, he islay pilin, why would he not be able to carry those vines? Meaning, what's the point of a contention here? There's a discussion between Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and Rabbi Nosson whether or not elephant feed is muktzah. Well, if he actually has that creature in his possession, and certainly there's no contest, there's no discussion here. Of course it's not muktzah. It's designated to feed his animal. Elo ra'ui. Apparently we're not speaking about a case where this animal is actually in his possession, he's actually raising it. Rather, Rav Shimon Gamliel was telling us a chiddush. Roi. That although personally he's not raising it, but he's roi to raise it. Something which is raised by royalty, by wealthy people, is considered to be appropriate conduct, even for your ordinary person, for your ordinary Yisrael. It's roi for him to raise this animal. Therefore, the food which is generally fed to this animal is considered to be designated for this animal. It's not muktzah. Hachinami roi. Here as well, when we speak about the ostriches, we don't actually need it to be there present. We don't need him to actually be raising the namiyos. Rather, as long as he's a Yisrael and Kol Yisrael B'nei Malachim, he is roi to raise it, and it's not muktzah. So Rav Ashi, he disputed Ameimer's contention. You require the animal to actually be present. I agree with you. If an animal is present, then there's no discussion. And the animal, which a person is actually raising, the food which is designated to be fed for that animal, wouldn't be muktzah. Very practical consideration. It's designated for that animal. The point of Reb Nosson was, he meant to add even those elephants, which he does not have in his possession. It's roi. Since he's a Yisrael, it's roi for him to have it, because Kol Yisrael B'nei Malachim. Ela roi, hachinami roi. Likewise, when it comes to the ostriches, Rav Shimon Gamliel just meant to say that he's roi to raise it, but he doesn't actually have to have it in his possession. Continues more, Omar Abai. We had this concept of Kol Yisrael B'nei Malachim Heim. all of Yisrael are regarded, classified as sons of royalty, and are granted the privileges of royal families when it comes to halachos. Amar Abaye, I'll give you a list. We find this many times in Gemara where Abaye gives us a list of similar shitas, which all have a common denominator. Says Abaye, I'll give you a list of Manda Amrim who subscribe to this concept. Rishim Gamliel, Rab Shimon, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Kiva, Kulu, Svirlu, they all subscribe to the concept of Kol Yisrael B'nei Melachim Heim. Rishim Gamliel Hodamar, what we just said, with regard to the ostriches, and with regard to the ravens in the Mishnah. Reb Shimon, what do we find there? Desnan B'nei Melachim, we learned in the Mishnah earlier in Masechel Shabbos regarding refuah, that one cannot engage in practices of remedy, of medicine, for minor illnesses, for concern that he might go ahead and prepare those ingredients and do the melacha of toich. Now, this prohibition, this isser, is strictly limited to a case where he's obviously engaging in refuah. It's something which is nikar, but something which is being done even for remedial purposes, but it's not obvious, it's not nikar that it is so, it is mutter. So the Mishnah told us, B'nei Melachim, Sachin al gabe mekasem, so these princes may smear on their wounds shemen veret, even this expensive, exotic oil, this rose oil, they can use it. Why? Shekein darkan sh'bnei Melachim lasa b'chayil, because it is the practice for these B'nei Melachim to commonly apply this oil even during an ordinary weekday when there's no wound present. Something which they do as a common practice. So it's not obviously being done for refuah, and therefore it's mutter even if they do it for the forsake. So this is Tanakama. Rab Shimon Omer Kol Yisrael B'nei Melachim. All of Yisrael have the category of B'nei Melachim, and therefore they as well can use the rose oil even to place on a wound. Kol Yisrael B'nei Melachim. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Kiva, where do we find that they subscribe to this concept? The Sanya, Hareisha Yenoishim by 1,000 mana. There's a fellow who owes 1,000 mana, v'lovish itzla baskuf mana, and he's wearing this elegant garment worth 100 mana, something beyond extraordinary, beyond the average acceptable standards. Now we know that we don't take away a person's basic needs, basic sustenance, even if he's a Baal Chayv and he owes lots of money. We leave him with his basics. Now his clothing certainly constitutes as his basics. So the question here is, if he's wearing this elegant garment, can we go ahead and tell him, well, listen, Rabid, you don't need such an elegant piece of material. We'll give you something standard, and we'll sell this one, and use the rest to pay back your debt. So the Tanakama holds, yes, ma'afshit and oisai, we remove this garment, and we exchange it, we give him to wear something which is appropriate for him, something standard, something average. Tana, Mishum Rabbi Shmuel, Vitana, Mishum Rabbi Kiva, they hold, no. You can't take this elegant garment, Kol Yisrael Ru'uyin, Lo Isa Itzla, all of Yisrael are suitable for this elegant garment. You have no right to take it away. He's a son of Hashem, Bnei Melachim. You must leave it. This is considered to be his basic necessities, basic needs, and you must leave it intact. So in summary, we learned about the heter to be metaltal, animal feed. Now, if he personally has this exotic animal in his possession, certainly he can be metaltal, the food which is designated for this animal. Likewise, if it is a derech to raise these animals, for instance, the deer or the yoinim, one can go ahead and be metaltal, the feed which is suitable for these animals. What about if it's only derech of bnei melachim to raise these animals? For instance, the ostriches, the ravens. According to Tanakama, it's asa. According to Shimon Gamliel, it's mutar because kol Yisrael bnei melachim. Rav Nosson adds that it was even common practice for the bnei melachim to raise elephants. So elephant feed is mutar as well. Continues the Gemara. Chavile kash v'chavile v'chulu. Tana Rabbanan. Chavile kash, bundles of straw, v'chavile eitzim, bundles of wood, v'chavile zradim, bundles of these reeds. So these things can be used either as firewood or as animal feed. And that will determine its muksa status. If he designated it for animal feed, when we move them. But otherwise, in which case they are meant to be used as firewood, they're considered to be useless. They're muktzah ein metalton oisam. One cannot move them. Rab Shimon Gamliel Omer, even when it's designated as animal feed, it depends on the size. Chavilan, packages hanitolim b'yad achad. So bundles which can be carried using merely one hand, small light bundles, mutal taton, one may carry it on Shabbos. B'shtei yadayim, but if they're large and heavy, and two hands are required to move them, asur taton, in which case they can't be moved because of tircha. So although it's not muktzah, but it's considered to be excessive exertion, and that's not mutter on Shabbos. Continues the Braisa, Chavilei Sia, Ezoi, Vikurnis, all these types of plants, bundles of these plants. So again, it depends on the designation. Hichnisan le'etzim, if he gathered them for the sake of firewood, Ein mistapik b'hem b'Shabbos, he cannot use them on Shabbos. L'macha behema, but if it's for animal feed, mistapik b'hem Shabbos, he may use them on Shabbos. The Braisa continues, V'koitem b'yad v'oichel, he can chop them into small pieces, using his hands, and eat. Provided that he doesn't chop it using a kli, in which case it would involve a malacha of toichen, of grinding. Now what if he wants to remove the seeds from the pods, so you can roll, he can rub these plants, and eat, provided that he doesn't use a utensil, a kli. Now the word harbe, some actually take out the word harbe. The point according to Rabbi Yehuda is they cannot use a kli, because if one would use a kli, that would be connected with the malacha of mefarik, of dash, extraction something from its the extraction of something from its encasement, as disha does. It takes the grain out of its husk. So here as well, these seeds coming out of these stalks of these pods. So the only way he could do it is derech shini. If he does it differently than during the week, he uses his hands, he does it manually, and he eats it in that manner, in which case it is mutter. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. V'chacham Omer, they apply different guidelines for allowance here. Moilel brashetz ba'osav, he can rub, he can roll using the tips of his the heads of his fingers, meaning not using your palms. You can use the rashetz ba'osav on top of his fingers, provided that it doesn't use his hands and rubs it in that manner. And likewise, he can't do a lot, meaning there are two conditions according to Rabbanan. Number one, do b'roshetz ba'osav. Number two, only a small amount at once, in which case it's different. It doesn't, it's not reminiscent of the ordinary malacha, like they say, meaning don't do b'yadei harbe kedei she'ois b'chol, the way which would resemble the way he does it during the week. So it's done differently. In this case, it's considered to be, some Mepharshim say it's like derech achila, he's merely preparing his personal food here. It's not considered to be processing the produce here, and it's not a malach. V'chein ba'amita, the same concepts apply to this plant called amita, which the Gemara is going to say is actually mint. V'chein b'fega, v'chein b'shar min etavlim, same thing regarding other types of spices. My amita, what is that? Ninya, Rashi says it's mintai, which is mint. What is sia of Rabbi Yehuda Tzasri? What is ezov? Avrasa. What is kurnis? Kurnisa shema. That's it's called kurnisa. Says the Gemara, Vaha hahuda amarlu. How could you say that kurnis is kurnisa? There was a story where this fellow called out, Vaha ahu, there was this fellow, the amarlu, who called out to them, Man boy kurnisa, who would like kurnis? Vishtaka chashi, and they found him in possession of chashi. So you see that kurnis is actually chashi and not kurnisa. Ella, says the Gemara, sia is tzitzri, like we said before, ezov is eversa, and kurnis is actually chashi, like we have in the story. Continues the Gemara, Itma we learned. Basar maliach, salted meat, so we have fresh raw meat of a behema or a chaya, which is raw, but it is maliach, it is salted. In which case, a person can, out of necessity, b'shas adchak, eat this meat. So it's considered to be technically edible, and therefore, mutal tafel b'Shabbos, one may move it on Shabbos. What about basar tafel? Tafel means it's bland, unsalted. So you have fresh raw meat, unsalted meat. So it's not really edible in its current form. And certainly one can't cook it on Shabbos. So it's basically useless. Now, although one can technically feed it to a chaya, but it's not designated for that purpose. It's not prepared for that, because something which is fit for human consumption, which is designated to be eaten by the Adam, is generally not prepared for the animal. So it's not muchan for the animal. The question here is whether something which is einoi muchan is considered muktzah. So we have a machlekes. Rav Huna Amar mutar l'tatli. One may go ahead and move it on Shabbos. Rav Chizda Amar also l'tatli. One may not. Says the Gemara, Rav Huna Amar mutar l'tatli. You may move it on Shabbos, because since technically it's suitable, although not for the Adam, but it's suitable for the animal, although it's not prepared for that purpose, it's not muchan for that, it's not designated for that, because something which is suitable for him, he's not going to give to his animal. So it's not muchan for that. Nevertheless, Rav Huna holds, one may move it on Shabbos, it's not considered to be muktzah. Says the Gemara, well, this really depends on the question, on the machlekes between Rav Yehuda, who subscribes to the broad application of muktzah. We had this several times. He holds that in order for something to be mutar on Shabbos, it needs to be muchan for Shabbos. It needs to be prepared. We learn this from the pasuk of Veichine Asher by the man. They're meant to prepare before Shabbos. So something needs to be prepared for Shabbos use in order to allow its use on Shabbos. So although we're not speaking about something which is useless, it's a piece of meat that can be fed to an animal, but it's not prepared for this purpose. So according to Yehuda, it's muktzah. Whereas according to Shimon, it's not muktzah unless it's inherently useless, unless it's negated due to the actual nature of the thing itself. But something which merely lacks preparedness is not considered muktzah. Likewise, with this piece of meat, it's suitable to be fed to an animal. So although not prepared for that purpose, it's not muktzah according to Reb Shimon. So let's get back to our Gemara. Rav Chizda said it's asur, Rav Huna said it's mutar. And apparently Rav Chizda follows Rav Yehuda's opinion. He considers this to be muktzah because it's not prepared. Whereas Rav Huna seems to be going with Rav Shimon. Says the Gemara, how's that? Rav Huna, Talmud of Rav. Rav Huna was a Talmud of Rav. What does Rav hold? Rav Rav Yehuda's freely. The Islam muktzah, we know that Rav subscribes to Rav Yehuda's opinion regarding muktzah. So how does Rav Huna allow the moving of this meat? Says the Gemara, b'muktzah la'achila, pertaining to eating, when muktzah pertains to the ability, the discussion of achila, so like Rav Yehuda. In that context, Rav Huna indeed holds like Rav Yehuda that unless it's been prepared, it cannot be eaten on Shabbos. However, when it comes to merely moving it, b'muktzah l'taltal, in the context of moving something, so like Reb Shimon, in that case he subscribes to Reb Shimon's view in muktzah, and simply due to the lack of preparedness, it's not considered to be muktzah. The Farshim explain the reason for this distinction is because the requirement for hachana pertaining to eating allowance is based on the pasuk of Veichine Asher by the man, so it's based on a pasuk. Therefore, it's considered to be more stringent, and therefore Rav Huna, when it comes to eating, he follows Rabbi Yehuda's shita in muktzah, as opposed to the Issa Tiltal, which is the Rabbanan for concern that he might actually carry out Nishus Harabim, etc. It's not based on a pasuk, therefore he regards it more leniently, and therefore he allows moving this piece of meat, although it's unprepared for Shabbos use. Continues the Gemara. Rav Chizda Amar Asa. So Rav Chizda was the one who said it's muktzah, since it's unprepared, he can't even move it. Rav Chizda Amar Asa. Says the Gemara, how does that work? For Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Ambi, there was a story that Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Ambi Ikla Libei Rav Chizda, he visited the home of Rav Chizda, and he noticed Hahur Bar Avza, this duck, Davo Kamataltule, that they were moving it mishim shalatula, out of the sun into shade. This was a fresh duck, a raw duck. And why did they do it? They were prompted actually by Rav Chizda, by his comment, because he had said, "V'amar Rav Chizda, chisorin kischa chazinan hacha." When he noticed the duck sitting in the sun, he said, "I see chisorin kis, I see loss of value here, meaning I see a hefsed coming. the duck is going to spoil in the sunlight. So that prompted them to relocate it. Apparently, Rav Chizda holds one may move a raw piece of meat on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Shani bar Avza. A duck is different. The chazil umtza, because it is suitable to be eaten as is. The meat is soft and tender, and therefore, even when it's raw, when it's uncooked, it's still considered to be roy la'achila, b'shas hadchak. Out of necessity, one would eat it. Therefore, it's considered to be prepared and designated, even for human consumption, and is not muktzah, as opposed to animal meat, behema v'chaya, that is not really edible for a human, and therefore is considered to be muktzah on Shabbos. Tanu Rabbana, dog maliach. What about fresh fish, but it is salted fish? You have a salted herring, for instance. It's perfectly edible. Mutal tatloi, one may move it. Dog tafel, a bland piece of raw fish, unsalted. Also tatloi, one may not move it on Shabbos. As Rashi points out, that even according to the shita that allows moving the fresh meat earlier, on account of its suitability for animals. A dog tafel is different because that, Rashi says, is not roy for dogs. They wouldn't eat it. Basar, what about raw meat? Bein tafel, whether it's bland, meaning unsalted, bein maliach, whether it's salted, mutal tatloi, one may move it. And apparently we're following the shita of Rav Shimon, who does not subscribe to muktzah in this case, since technically it can be fed to the animals. It's not muktzah. Tana Rabbanon. When we move bones, because it is fed to dogs and is considered to be muchen for them. What about spoiled meat? That can be moved as well, because it is fed to the chaya. What about water which was left uncovered, in which case a person may not drink from it for concern that perhaps a snake arrived and deposited his venom? So can one move that water on Shabbos? Says more, yeah, because it's suitable for a cat. Let's take a look at Rashi. The top line here, basas of fuach means masriach, spoiled meat. Lechatzul for a cat. Leimazik le'eres the venom of a snake does not harm him. Sha'af hanachosh because a cat will even eat the snake itself. Continues the Gemara. Rav Shimon leil omer kol atzman osala shoysan. The entire thing itself, meaning this water which was left uncovered, one may not leave it around on account of danger. Perhaps somebody will come along and drink from this water. So in summary, we learned about basar of a behema, v'chaya, if it's salted and technically can be eaten by a adam, it is not muktzah and is mutter to move on Shabbos. What about raw meat which is unsalted? According to Rav Huna, although one may not eat it on Shabbos, but one may go ahead and move it on Shabbos. According to Rav Chizda, one may not even move it because it's muktzah. What about spoiled meat? All agree that it's mutter because that is designated to be fed to the animals. What about raw duck meat? Even if it's tafel, meaning bland, unsalted, it's mutter to be moved because, technically speaking, one can eat it out of necessity, b'shas hadchak. What about fish? So it depends. If it's salted, certainly it's fully edible and it's not muktzah. If it's unsalted, then it's asur according to all shittas, because it's not useful for any purpose. He can't even feed it to his dogs. What about bones? Bones are not muktzah because that is fed to the dogs. And finally we had these mayim megulim. That's not muktzah as well because the cat would drink it. Continues the Mishnah. Koifin es asal. One may overturn a sali basket of ne'afreichem in front of the chicks, kadesh yalu v'yerdu, so that they can go up and down to their coop, to and from their coop, using this basket. So what's the chiddush here? Rashi points out, although he's being metatel a kli for the sake of the afreichem, which are muktzah, as the Gemara discussed earlier in the Masechta. Tarnagol shebarcha. What if a chicken escaped? Doichen oisa, one may push it until it comes back home. Midadin agolin usyachim, one may go ahead and hold on and help the calves, the agolim, the calves, the young donkeys. You can hold on to them, not lift them, but actually just hold on to them by their neck or by their sides and help them walk. Says continues the Mishnah, Isha Medada is bina. So one second, we're speaking about even something which is an animal which is really muktzah. So one cannot actually lift an animal on Shabbos and Balchai is muktzah, considered to be useless. We're speaking about cases where there's a hefsid moment involved. There's a potential property loss where this Tarnagolis ran away. These Agol Misyachim escaped. So you can go ahead and work out a way that they should come back. So by the Tarnagolis, Mishnah tells us, he must push it. He can't actually hold on to it and have it walk in that manner. Whereas when it comes to the Agol Misyachim, or more lenient, Midaden, he can hold on to them and assist them and have them walk back home in that manner. So although he's actually moving muktzah, the Chacham allowed it in the case of a hefsid moment. Continues the Mishnah. Likewise, Isha medadas b'na, a mother can go ahead and help her child walk, and the Gemara will tell us even if she's ceramic, she can do so. Oh, Rabbi Yehuda Emasai, when is this allowed? Bizman shehu noitel achas, when he has the ability to lift one foot, or meneach achas, and he places one, meaning he walks. She's simply helping him walk. But if he's simply dragging his feet, then asr, she can't do that because she's actually carrying him, which is not allowed. So an animal fell into a stream, a water trench. Maybe karim exercise. So you can bring karim exercise pillows, or karim usually means mattresses, exercise pillows. So pillows, cushions, and he can go ahead and place underneath it to assist it in its ascent, allow it to climb up. Also, if it climbed up, if it came out, then fine. So, but he can't actually physically lift the animal, which is muktzah. Meisve, we have a brisa which seems to tell us that is not allowed. An animal which fell into the amasamayim, he needs to provide its provisions right there in its place, so it doesn't die, so you can place some food there. But that's it. Parnasa in, only its provisions he can provide. He can't do that. Says the Gemara. Now, why wouldn't he be able to do the karim miksas? The Gemara is going to tell us because of a concern of mavata kli mechanai, as we'll see soon. So the brisa seems to imply that only providing sustenance is allowed, but placing these utensils to allow the animal to climb out, that's not allowed. Says Malay Kasha, it's not a Kasha. The Efsha Parnasa. The brisa, which insists on limiting the allowance here to Parnasa, is only when that's an option. But the halacha that we learned earlier, placing the karim miksases to assist the animal in climbing out, is a case of the Efsha Parnasa, that there's no Parnasa option at hand. Perhaps it's a deep pit and it's just not viable. So therefore, he may place the karim miksasais to facilitate its exit. Efsher b'panasa in, v'loi, if efsher b'panasa in, if one can go ahead, provide panasa, fine, do that. V'loi, but otherwise maybe karim miksasais, he brings those karim miksasais and places it underneath. Says the Gemara, how can you allow placing these utensils underneath the animal? He's negating the kli from its preparedness, meaning, when he places it under the animal, meaning he allows the animal to walk on it, what's happening is the kli right now is becoming nullified. It can't be used any longer. It's sitting under muktzah. Rashi explains it's an issa d'rabbanan. It looks like he's demolishing, like soiser. So how can he do that? Answers the Gemara. Savar. The reason why he can do it is because he holds mevata kli me'echanai. The Ma'adamar, Vidam Rab holds that the halacha mevata kli me'echanai, nullifying a kli from its designation, is merely d'rabbanan. It's an issa d'rabbanan. However, when he's coming to rescue his animal, he's actually addressing a more serious concern, tsar balachayim, doiraisa, preventing distress from a creature. It's a biblical obligation. Rashi will give us the source. So since the consideration here is tsar balachayim, v'asi doiraisa, this biblical consideration, this chiyuv of tsar balachayim, will come along v'dochid rabbanan and negate, suspend the issa d'rabbanan. That takes precedence. Therefore, one can place those karim miksases to remove the tsar, the stress of the animal, despite the fact that it involves a rabbinic concern. Let's take a look at Rashi, who is 14 lines from the top of the Amud, beginning with the words v'akum avata kli me'echanai. So the Gemara asked, how can he place the karim miksases? Isn't he being mavatal the kli? Once they're underneath, he can't any longer be metaltal those kalim. The doime or vidaime l'soiser binyam d'rabbanan. It appears like he's demolishing a binyan midrabanan. He's taking a kli, which is perfectly functioning and useful, and he is terminating its use. So that's considered to be like soiser midrabanan, and that's awesome. Continue the Gemara, fine, that's one consideration. But on the other side, we have tsar balachayim, which is the iraisa. Shenemar ozev tazav imay. Torah is instructing a person to go help his friend unload his animal. V'ikaman, the dorish time of the kra. And there is a manama who explains the reason is mishum tsar balachayim, be'elu metzias. The reason is it's based on relieving the animal of its tsar, its stress. So that's a issa minat Torah, it's a chiv minat Torah. Therefore, that takes precedence. Let's get back to the Gemara. Tarnagolis shebarcha. The Mishnah said that one has a tarnagolis who escaped. He can go ahead and push it back till it gets back home. Doichen in, he may push it, but medaden loy. Medaden again means holding on to the sides and facilitating its walking, assisting it in the hiluch. That he can't do to a tarnagolis, as opposed to the agolam v'syachim, which the Mishnah says he can go ahead and be medada those animals. He can go ahead and help them walk. Says the Gemara, Tanina lahada tan rabban. So our Mishnah actually parallels what we learned in the following brayso, medaden behema chaya v'oif b'chotzer. One may help the behema chaya or oif in their walking if it's in a chotzer. Avalois hatarnagolis, but he cannot do so to tarnagolis. Says the Gemara, why? Why is a tarnagolis an exception? Tarnagolis my time aloi. Why do you only allow one to push it, but not to actually help it walk? Because a chicken has a tendency to lift itself off the floor, in which case we have a concern that he may go ahead and actually carry it, which is a muktzah concern. He's being metaltal b'achai. So if he holds on to it and facilitates its walking, perhaps the animal, the tarnagolis, will lift itself up in the air, and he will end up actually holding on to it, fully carrying it, which is muktzah. Therefore, we only allow him to push him, in which case there's no concern. This is in contrast to the other animals, the calf, etc., who don't entail this phenomenon. Therefore, there's no concern. He may go ahead and hold them as they walk. Continues the Gemara Tani Chada. We have one brayso which says Medadin behema v'chayvav b'chotzer. So may help the behema chayvav walk in the chotzer. Avalei b'shesarab, but not in shesarab. Out of concern that perhaps he might actually end up carrying them, in which case he's doing it isam and atur, carrying shesarab. So you can only do this in a chotzer. Va'isha medada as b'na b'shesarab. But when it comes to a child, a mother can do medada, can help the child walk, even in shesarab. Certainly, there's no need to say that in the chotzer she can do so. Rashi explains because a person is different than an animal. If a person is carried on Shabbos, it's not really a malacha. We apply the concept of chaynu. He says atzmai. The person lightens himself somewhat. It's not considered to be a malacha. So at worst case scenario, she'll carry him, although not allowed. But if she does it, she's not doing a malacha. Therefore, she can be medada b'na b'shesarabim, as opposed to the animals, where medada and shesarabim is not allowed. So this is one brayso. V'tani idach, we have another brayso which says, ein oikrin behema v'chayev b'chotzer. One may not actually carry the behema or the chaya, the oif, in the courtyard. So apparently lifting is not allowed. But being medada, holding onto them, supporting them as they walk, that's allowed. Then the brayso concludes, Avo, doichen bem sheyikansu. However, you can push them so that they come back in. Now, it would seem from here that merely pushing is allowed, but being medada is not. So we seem to have an inherent contradiction here. Hagufa kashir. Amras, first you say, ein oikrin. You may not lift, avo deduyim medadinan. But that implies that helping them in their walking, holding on to them as they walk, is allowed. V'hada amras, then you say, doichen. In. Pushing, yes. Medadin loy. Apparently, medad is not allowed. Amar Abaye, seifa ason l'tarnagolis. The brayso must be split into two. The first part, which allows medada, speaking about other animals, which there's no concern there. He'll simply assist them as they walk, and he's fine. The seifa, which we had an inference, a diuk, to the extent that you cannot be medada, speaking about a tarnagolis, in which case is a concern because it lifts itself, and in that case, the only thing that's allowed is pushing it, which does not entail this concern. Amar Abaye, based on this Gemara, the tarnagolis lifts itself. Haiman the shachat tarnagolis, one who slaughters the tarnagolis, lichbeshinu lekari bara, he should press down, bend down its feet on the ground. Inami, alternatively, nedelu medel, he should lift them up, meaning not to allow the tarnagolas to position himself, to gain support on the ground. Why? The dilma manachlu tufrei ba'ara, perhaps he'll embed his claws in the ground and support himself in that manner and lift himself. Va'akar lu simanim, and by doing so he will be oikel, will uproot his simanim. Simanim are the kana and the veshet, which require shchita. So those two simanim, the trachea, the windpipe, the esophagus. So if he's going to allow himself to be lifted, if you're going to allow him to support himself, perhaps he'll have free reign here. He'll move around, and the simanim will become uprooted, and the shchita will become invalidated. Okay, so in summary, we learned that pushing is allowed, whether to an animal, whether to a tarnagolas. What about medadin? So behema v'chay and a chatzar is allowed. Regarding a katan, that's allowed even in Shusarabim. Regarding a tarnagolas, one may not do so because the tarnagolas tends to lift itself, in which case there's a concern of carrying muktzah. Continues the Mishnah, Emi yaldin as a behema b'yamtiv. One may not go ahead and deliver the offspring of a behema on yamtiv. He may not pull out the fetus because it involves tircha. Aval mesadin, but he can be of assistance. The Gemara will explain exactly what mesadin, what assistance means. But certainly, an isha, one may go ahead and deliver her baby on Shabbos. Likewise, he can go ahead and call a chachama midwife, even from a faraway place, even from out of the tchum. Shabbos, one may do chilul Shabbos for the sake of this isha who's giving birth. One may tie the umbilical cord, which is necessary for the well-being of the child. He may also cut it. All the tzrachim, the needs of the bris milah, can be done on Shabbos. So one may not deliver the animal, but he can go ahead and help out. How is that? It simply means that he holds on to the fetus as it's coming out, so it doesn't drop down on the floor. He can even press the flesh, the womb of the animal, to manipulate, to induce the giving birth of the vlad. Tanya kavase Daf Yuda. We have a brayso in support of Yuda. Ketzad mesaden. What is the example of mesaden? Uychsan savlad. Hold on to the vlad shel yipoil la'aretz. V'nefech lebechoitmai. You may go ahead and blow into its nostril to clear them. V'nos leidad l'sech piv. It's speaking about an animal. And likewise, you can place the dad, the udder of the mother into the mouth of the offspring sheyinak, so that it nurses. If we were faced with a situation where the mother estranged himself from the offspring, we would try to evoke rachmanas and pity. On a kosher animal, if this took place on Yom Tov, how did they do that? Heichi Avid. So what did he do? Amar Abaye, maybe Bulshel Melach takes a fistful of salt and places it into the womb of the mother behema, so that she recalls the pain of the childbirth, and she will have pity on him. Somehow this evokes the feelings, the mercy of the mother. Likewise, they spritz the meishilya, the juice of the placenta, on the offspring, so the mother discerns its scent, and she has pity on him. This only applies to a kosher animal. But regarding a non-kosher animal, this may not be done. Why? My time. The tmeya does not reject its vlad, but if she does it, if she rejects the vlad, she no longer reaccepts it. So there's no point, it's useless to go through this process. Continues the Gemara, miyalden as the isha. So one may deliver the baby of an isha. Michti, let's take a look. Tanalei, the Mishnah already said miyalden as the isha. Vikor l'chacham makam, call the midwife. Mechalal as Shabbos, l'suyamai. What is the Mishnah adding by saying you can go ahead and mechalal Shabbos on her behalf? What's missing here? What procedure was not yet mentioned? Says the Gemara, it's coming to include ha the Tanur Rabbanan. What we learned in the following brayso: if the isha needs a ner to be lit on Shabbos, chaverta madlekas lasaner, her friend can light the candle for her. If she has a need for oil, her friend can go bring shemen even through Rishus Harabim. Biyad, she should bring it in her hands, which is derech shinoi. It's deviating from the ordinary way of bringing liquid, which is in a container. This way, she's avoiding the malach of eitzah. But if it's not sufficient, what she has in her hand is not sufficient, and she must bring a larger quantity, what does she do then? Mevia b'sa'ara, then she has the oil absorbed into her hair, and she transports it through Rishus Harabim in that manner. But if oil in her hair would not be sufficient, what does she do? Mevia b'kli, she simply brings a container with oil for the ish. Omar Ma, we just learned to Moisat Tzricha L'ner, if she needs a candlelit, her friend lights the ner for her. Pshita, isn't that obvious? Why not? Why would you think otherwise? It's Pekuach Nefesh. Lo Tzricha must be speaking out Besuma, that the Isha who's giving birth is actually blind. Perhaps I would think, keep it Lo Chazia, since she has no ability to see Asr. There's no reason to allow lighting a candle. Kamash Malan, the Bryce informs us, yes. Isuvi Miyaswadata, her mind becomes at ease when the candle is lit for her sake. Why? Savar, she figures, Ika Midi. If there's something, there's a need which arises, Chazi Chavertev Avdali, my friend will see and will do it for me, because the place is lit and everything is visible. So lighting a candle, even for a blind woman, is allowed because it adds to her presence of mind and is necessary for well-being. Continues the Gemara, Moisat Tzricha L'shemen. So the Brisa told us that if the hand is not sufficient, so you have it absorbed into her hair. The point here is to spare yourself a malacha of haitzah. Says the Gemara, fine. You avoided the malacha of carrying Rishus Harabim because you did it derech shina, you deviated. It's not the ordinary way of carrying. But there's another malacha which applies here. What about schita? There's going to be an issa schita when she squeezes the oil out of her hair. It's a malacha of mefarik, of dash, extracting something from its encasement, like the grains from the husk. That's a malacha. So what do you gain? So you avoided one malacha, instead you did another. Rabbi, Rav Yosef, Damar Tavai, they both explained, Ein schita b'seir. The concept of squeezing does not apply to hair. Rashi explains, it's kosher, it's enibulei, it's stiff, it's hard, it doesn't absorb a significant enough amount to be considered a malacha of schita. Rav Ashi Amar, I feel tema yesh schita b'seir, even if you say schita will apply to seir, the Brisa didn't mean to have the oil absorbed in the hair. Rather, it meant like this: Mevia la bikli derech sara. She brings the oil in the container, but she ties it to her hair. So it's a derech shinoi, the kama, the efshel shanui mishanin. As much as we can deviate, we're meant to deviate. So although she's bringing it in a container, but since she ties it to her hair, it's considered to be a shinoi, a deviation from the norm. It does not constitute the malach of etzam and atayra, and therefore this is preferred. Time for a brief review of today's daf. We began with a discussion of the various objects in our Mishnah, which can be moved on Shabbos, and the Gemara told us the chidushim involved, and the Gemara proceeded with animal feed, which one may move on Shabbos. So if this feed is meant for an exotic animal, which he actually is raising in his property, in his possession, he has it, it's mutter, because it's designated for this animal. If this animal is commonly raised, there as well the animal feed is mutter. What if it's only something which b'nei melachim raise? Tanakama says that animal feed is asur. Ushimim Leil says it's mutter, because he holds kol yisrael b'nei melachim heim. So a feed which is designated for ravens or for those the glass pieces for ostriches, they're mutter to be moved. Rav Nassan adds even elephant feed. We discussed those bundles of wood, of reeds, and the Gemara told us, well, it depends if it's designated for firewood, it's muktzah. For animal feed, it is not muktzah. The Gemara discussed different types of moilel, of rubbing, rolling those plants. We had Rabbi Yehuda Shita, Rabbana Shita. We proceeded with different types of meat regarding the basar v'hem v'chaya. If it's salted and technically edible for a person, it's mutter. If it's bland and inedible, according to Rav Huna, he can move it because, technically speaking, it's still roy for an animal. Whereas Rav Chizah said, he cannot move it, it's muktzah because it's not designated, it's not prepared for that purpose. If it's spoiled meat, then it's mutter because it's designated for a chaya. Regarding duck meat, which is raw and uncooked, that is mutter because it's soft and tender and edible for a person. Regarding fish, raw fish, so if it's salted, then it's perfectly edible and it's mutter. If it's unsalted, then it's asr. Bones are not muktzah, and that water which was left exposed, is mutter as well, since a cat will drink it. The Gemara told us one may push the tarnagoylis back home, one may go ahead and handle the animals, help them walk from the chatzar. Regarding a katan, a woman may do that to a katan, even if she's a rabbin. Regarding a tarnagoylis, one may not handle tarnagoylis, concerned that since it has a tendency to lift itself, he may actually go out and lift the muktzah. We learned about delivering a baby on Shabbos, as opposed to the delivering of a offspring of an animal, which is not allowed. The Gemara told us that anything required for the Isha can be done on Shabbos or Mechal Shabbos. We prefer to do a derech shinu to avoid malacha. The Mishnah told us that even tzorchei mila, anything needed for the mila, may be done on Shabbos. And regarding a behema, although one may not deliver the offspring, but the Gemara told us misadin, one may be of help and evoke mercy from the mother to the offspring.